Om Tyageshwaram Ramakrishnam Saradam Matrarupinim Vivekanandam Acharyam Natva Bhakshyami Shuddhaya Yogena Chittasya Padena Vacha Malam Sharirasya Cha Bhaishajena Yopakarottam Pravaram Muninam Patanjalim Paranjaliranatosmi. The discussion that is going on is about kleshas or afflictions or obstacles that we all experience. These are nothing but emotions or drives that we have in our minds. We discussed 4 of them in our last class. Asmita, Ragadvesha and Abhinivesha. 4 of them we discussed. Asmita is sense of ego, I. That comes up as a result of the identification of the seer and the instrument of seeing. Purusha or the self is the seer and Antahkarana or mind is the instrument of seeing. Their identification gives rise to this klesha, affliction, obstacle called asmita. Then we get the experience that I am dull or I am alert, I am sleepy. All these things are qualities of the mind, but we experience them. So there is that sense of identification with the mind. So also I am seeing and all that. So this is called asmita, the sense of ego, which is a klesha. The second and third are very common. We experience them very often. Raga and dvesha, attachment or attraction, and repulsion or hatred. As Patanjali says, these are on account of pleasure and pain. Person who has experienced either pleasure or pain, such a person gets the memory of that pleasure or pain and consequently feels a sense of attraction or repulsion towards that pleasure or pain or towards the means of that pleasure and pain. So whatever is means of pleasure, I'll feel attraction towards it. Whatever has been the instrument of misery, I feel hatred towards it. But all these presuppose, both these presuppose an experience. Experience of pleasure will give rise to raga. That's why it's called Sukhanushay raga. An experience of misery will give rise to dvesha. So these we experience very often in our life. The third and the last, fourth, was abhinivesha, that it's clinging to life or fear of death, call it. It manifests in such ideas that may I never cease to be, may I live forever, that kind of ideas we get. This is fear of death, abhinivesha. And it was defined as swarasavahi vidushopi tatha rudha abhinivesha. This clinging to life is present even in learned, those who have studied, not those who have experienced their distinction of Purusha and Prakriti, not those who have realized the self, not those are not meant by Vidusha here, by Vidwan here. Here Vidwan means person who has intellectually understood that self is different from the non-self. Even such person, a learned person, as well as ignorant, both will have this clinging to life. Patanjali calls it swarasavahi, that is flowing from its own impressions, its own samskaras. The difference between ragadvesha and abhinivesha being, as we saw, ragadvesha depend on experiences of this life. In this life we have experienced some pleasure or pain. These give rise to attraction or repulsion. But when it comes to clinging to life or fear of death, we have not had any experience of death in this life. And hence, this fear of death that we have, or clinging to life that we have, it must be flowing from somewhere else. It must be originating from somewhere else, and that is the samskaras. That's why it is called swarasavahi, flowing from its own subliminal impressions, flowing from its own samskaras, and not from the experience of this life. Because in this life we have not had experience of death. Hence it is called swarasavahi. Now this, we discussed this in our last class. Now Vyasa, the commentator, takes this opportunity to establish that this fact of abhinivesha, or clinging to life, is a proof for past existence, or what is called a law of reincarnation, law of transmigration. This is the proof, because if we have not had this experience of death in this life, but still we fear death, which means the samskaras are there, and those samskaras have been created by experiences of previous life. Because samskara cannot be created without an experience. Subliminal impression cannot be created without an experience. So we have this fear of death, which we have not experienced in this life. Obviously it flows from the samskaras, or subliminal impressions, and these we have gathered, we have to accept from our experiences in previous life. So the experiences of death in previous life, those have created samskaras, and out of those samskaras flows this abhinivesha. That is how this fact of abhinivesha is a proof of the fact of reincarnation, or janmantaravada, or whatever, the fact that we had a previous existence. Now this is a topic which is debated. Even Swamiji also takes and describes or deals with this particular topic, because there are two objections raised to this fact. To say that fear of life is a proof of the fact of reincarnation, this is countered by two arguments by some people. They say fear of life can be explained by instinct, by calling it an instinct. Call it an instinct, and then you don't have to accept past life to explain this fear of death. You say it is instinctive. Thus, this fact of fear of life need not prove the life before birth. It need not prove. It can be explained as an instinct. But Swamiji says that instinct is just a name. He says, what is instinct? Instinct is nothing but coalesced experience. We consciously learn to ride a bicycle, to balance, or to swim and all that. Slowly that experience becomes an instinct. So instinct is nothing but coalesced experience. And actually this argument, instead of countering it, it supports the fact of reincarnation. The very fact that we have instinctive fear of death proves that we had experience of death. That experience has not happened in this life, must have happened in previous lives. So this theory of instinct actually, or the fact of instinct, it proves the fact of reincarnation. That's how instinct doesn't really counter the argument. The other counter argument given is the hereditary theory, or whatever, the fact of hereditary. And the argument is, you accept that this fear of life comes through hereditary transmission from parents to children. It's physical transmission. There is no need to accept past lives to explain the fear of death. You can explain it by this fact of hereditary. transmission, physical. For that we will have to take a broader look, because if hereditary transmission is going to explain the fear of death, then it should also explain all other traits that we find in children especially. We find that children of same parents have different traits. What does that explain? If it's just a matter of physical transmission, how is it that children of same parents have different traits? They should have had same traits. Or even twins have different traits. How do you explain that? If you say that the parents had many traits and these children picked some of those, then also it gives rise to another problem. Why did they choose only some traits and left out some traits? What made those children choose some traits from their parents and leave out others? Then it becomes a matter of chance. And chance has no place in facts and laws. If it's a law, then it can't have space and scope for chance. So hereditary does not explain all the facts that we see in life. We find young children having such talents which are not found in their family. Where do these get those? So hereditary does not really explain all the facts. So the considered view is a combination of these two. There is this fact of reincarnation. We also accept the fact of hereditary. When a soul is born, it doesn't come with a clean slate. It comes with bundle of impressions, samskaras. It comes with bundle of impressions. That is where the theory of reincarnation says that a soul is not born with a clean slate or just with characteristics of its parents. It comes with its own characteristics, its own traits of its own character, which it has accumulated over previous births. And then it seeks environment, which includes parents, which are best suitable or optimal for manifesting those traits. So if a soul is getting birth, it will seek such environment, it will seek such parents, which will be optimal, which will be most congenial for manifesting the traits which it is carrying. And hence, there will be some element of hereditary involved in it, but not all, because it is looking at the optimal environment, not exact environment. And thus, when we put these two together, the fact of reincarnation, the fact of soul coming in the world with its own baggage and not with a clean slate, and seeking optimal environment, that brings in the factor of hereditary transmission also, then we get a more or less reasonable explanation, which will explain all the facts. So this, Vyasamurti himself takes this subject and says that this abhinivesha, fear of death, is a proof for reincarnation. So these are the 5 kleshas that we have discussed. Avidya, asmita, ragadvesha, abhinivesha. Avidya, kshetramuttaresha. Avidya is the source, breeding ground for all. Avidya is present in all the kleshas, in all the afflictions. And we saw this avidya, it's fourfold. We have discussed that. One point we would like to discuss here, these kleshas are present in all human beings, even in animals they are present. They feel attraction and repulsion and fear of death and everything they feel. The difference between a spiritual seeker and an ordinary person or a worldly person is how they deal with the kleshas. Kleshas are there everywhere. How we deal with kleshas, that defines whether we are spiritual seekers or whether we are worldly seekers, whether we are seekers of the spirit or seekers of the world, how we deal with kleshas. For worldly seekers or seekers of the world, kleshas are a source of happiness, especially raga. They want, if there is no desire, there cannot be pursuit, there cannot be enjoyment. Their whole pleasure depends on desire for pleasure. Same about dvesha also. They want to take this hatred to the grave. They don't want to give it up. They want to take it to the grave. And so also fear. They don't want to get rid of fear. They want to, so to say, supplement it, you can say, by making all arrangements to secure themselves and get a false sense of security and peace. But they are responding to the fear, not trying to get rid of it, just trying to satisfy it. But when it comes to a spiritual seeker wants to get rid of the kleshas. That is the difference. The worldly seekers or seekers of the world want kleshas so that they can satisfy them and get whatever happiness or sense of fulfillment they get out of it. But spiritual seeker, a person who seeks the realm of the spirit, wants to get rid of the kleshas. That is the difference between spiritual seekers and seekers of the world. Tiraskara and adara. Sadhaka will have a sense of repulsion towards all the kleshas, tiraskara. Whereas the worldly people will have a friendly attitude, so to say, towards the kleshas. That is the difference. So, as spiritual seekers, we should know how these kleshas are harmful to us so that we will try to get rid of them. So this is the difference between the two, the spiritual seekers and the seekers of the world. How to eliminate these kleshas, that is the life, that is the spiritual life, so to say. And worldly life is how to satisfy or satiate this, satisfy or fulfill, pursue these kleshas, that is the worldly life. So this is the difference. Anyway, so now the spiritual seeker wants to get rid of the kleshas, not by satisfying them, but remove them completely. And next two sutras give us idea about it. So when Patanjali says, te pratiprasavaheyaha sukshmaha, te pratiprasavaheyaha sukshmaha, dhyanaheyastadvrittayaha. Dhyanaheyastadvrittayaha. Two sutras are there. So first we'll take the second one, which says dhyanaheyastadvrittayaha. The vrittis are to be controlled or to be got rid of through dhyana or meditation. These vrittis have to be turned into subtle form through dhyana, through meditation. The vrittis of the kleshas, the modifications of the kleshas, vrittis are very gross aspects. So kleshas in their gross aspects are to be countered or reduced to their subtle aspect through meditation. So the gross manifestations of the kleshas are to be reduced to their subtle manifestations through dhyana, through meditation. And when they have become subtle, te pratiprasavaheyaha sukshmaha. Those sukshma, those subtle manifestations, subtle forms of kleshas are to be got rid of through pratiprasava. Pratiprasava is a yogic term. It means pralaya. Opposite of prasava. Prasava is birth. Prati is opposite. Opposite of birth is pralaya. So now in this context, pralaya does not mean dissolution of the world. It means dissolution of the mind of the yogi. So these subtle forms, kleshas in their subtle forms, these can be got rid of only through the dissolution of the mind of the yogi. That happens in asampragnata samadhi or asampragnata yoga. In the asampragnata yoga, the mind will dissolve in its own cause, which is prakriti, and with mind, these subtle forms of kleshas or kleshas in their subtle form will be dissolved in the prakriti itself, will be got rid of. That is how the subtle manifestations or kleshas in their subtle forms are to be destroyed by resolving the mind in its own cause, which is the prakriti. That is the highest state of yoga. That is what is called kaivalya. There is nothing remains after that. And Vyasa Maharshi, while commenting on these two sutras, gives an analogy. It's a very apt analogy. He says, when we have to wash soiled clothes, different steps can be taken. He says, you just shake the clothes well in the air, and gross dirt will fall off. Just by shaking, gross dirt will fall off. First step. Second step, put in water, maybe beat them against a rock or beat them with a wooden stick or something. Some more dirt will go away. Still very subtle dirt will remain. For that you use some kshara, that is some chemicals. Use chemicals to remove the subtle part of that dirt. So we take 3 stages when we clean clothes. Just by shaking them in the air, we get rid of the gross dirt. By putting in water and beating them against the stone or whatever, we remove finer dust. And the finest part of dust, very subtle one, we use some chemicals. And he says, such is the treatment that we need to give to the kleshas also. Kleshas are nothing but dirts. So he says the grossest part can be handled by Kriya Yoga. Tapah Swadhyaya Ishvara Pranidhanani Kriya Yoga. By Kriya Yoga, the grossest part of the kleshas or kleshas in their gross form can be reduced to a less gross or subtler form. So Kriya Yoga is absolutely mandatory for every spiritual seeker. That is what reduces the strength of the kleshas. Then comes dhyana. These kleshas, through Kriya Yoga, they reach a stage which is called shushka kashta, like a dry twig. They have become like a dry twig, but they are still there. They have a potential to again become udara. So udara kleshas can be reduced to tanukrita kleshas, attenuated stages by Kriya Yoga. And then through dhyana, these tanukrita kleshas or attenuated kleshas are to be reduced to dagdhabija kleshas, that is burnt seed state. These are the 3 stages he talks of. Udara, fully manifest stages of klesha. Kleshas in udara avastha are to be reduced to tanva avastha, attenuated state through Kriya Yoga. Through meditation and dhyana, these are to be reduced further, and through prasankhana, which is a part of this process. This dhyana culminates in prasankhana. These will be reduced to dagdhabija avastha, the state of burnt seed. And then through asampragnata yoga, these will be completely destroyed along with the mind. So these are the 3 stages of handling the kleshas. First is Kriya Yoga, The second is dhyana, leading up to prasankhana, which is the knowledge. This knowledge will turn these kleshas into the dagdabijavastha, burned seed state. And then comes the asampragnata, which will destroy these kleshas along with the mind. So that's how he gives these two sutras. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.